1 week.
Yep. Welcome to our last mini lesson for OSHA. We have a couple fellow students, and I'm hoping a couple more are going to join us. And there's Mary. Hi, Mary. I'm just going over the final exam for OSHA. So I'm hoping that everybody can see that final exam open 1 week. I had intended to have it open this past week. So I will leave it open for a whole week, but the sooner you get done with it, the sooner I'm going to grade it and then submit your grade to the register, etc. So in order to get ready for the actual exam, I was just going to bring us through a quick review PowerPoint, which is available on the Moodle. And so hopefully you can see this, and I'm just going to fly through it quickly because we're getting over to our little role playing. And so here we are, ENV158. This is our course description. So I hope that's what you saw we covered. Here's some of the local concerns, and I can't emphasize how important these actually are. They might seem trivial, but these are the reasons for workers having lost days on the job, which is what a lot of companies as well as OSHA and employment offices look at. And these are the learning outcomes. So those were our goals throughout this semester here. So hopefully you saw that those were met with the grids and what the activities you worked on. And just a little review to get ready for some of the questions on the final exam. In the US, these are our different types of acronyms that we covered. And what they entail for the OSHA is about worker safety. It's not safety in households. It's not public health safety. It's not recreational safety. It's actually people that are employed as they're on the job safety. And it helps the United States keep an economic edge globally. RCRA, Resource Conservation Recovery Act, includes this cradle to grave, and we'll be doing that in our scenario when we do the decontamination and doff our PPE, is make sure that it is appropriately disposed of, and that if there was any problem with it later on, it would be able to trace it back to the responsible parties. And then we have the SARA Title III for EM reporting, emergency management, and then the NIOSH, and you have a link to the NIOSH, what used to be a paper booklet, which is now electronic, that gives us the PPE and acceptable exposures and types of respiratory protection. And of course, our environmental protection agencies, agency with the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, and Department of Transportation. And we had opened early on the semester with some certificates. And we have our Massachusetts has become a OSHA compliant state. For most of my life, it was not. It regulated itself. And so some states are federal OSHA compliant and some take on that responsibility for the work as internal in their state. And then the Department of Labor, and then we have regional. Here's a few links if you want to make sure that you have the most current regulations, and our course design is based on this Code of Federal Regulations 1910.120 and the 10-hour constructions right there. And I think, Jason, you have a 10-hour construction, is that right, certificate?
Yes.
Great. And you had asked a good question about does it expire? And I think you saw it doesn't expire for the 10-hour, but the 40-hour, you're supposed to have an 8-hour refresher annually.
Okay.
And so here we go with some other different media. My favorite, Diamond, and we'll talk about that in our scenario, as well as the DOT placarding, and then confined spaces. And Jason has a nice example from our own Barnstable water treatment facility. And quite frequently, the wastewater treatment facilities do have at least one, if not several, official labeled confined spaces. And here's a few of the key points off of there. Usually before employment on specific sites like a RECRA site, as well as a Superfund site, there is a pre-employment exam, an annual exam, and post-exposure, as well as post-employment. These are all things that are covered under the CFR regulations. And with that exam, if you're wearing an air purifying respirator, you would usually have your lung capacity checked as well as your heart, because when you wear an air purifying respirator, it doesn't, your heart has to work harder to get enough blood with the oxygen around to the heart muscle. And so if you're a longtime smoker, or you've had asbestos or any other type of damage, or have asthma, you might have some issues for meeting the requirements for the lung capacity. And they might check, I know on the sites I've worked on, they'll do a blood test for heavy metals. And some of these exams are to cover your employer's legal obligation to you, and not so much about your well-being, albeit it's not a bad thing, but just to give you the heads up, it is part of their litigation. 4 routes of entry: inhalation, digestion, absorption, injection. And then there are drug and alcohol testing at most of these RECRA, Superfund, and areas that have these hazardous materials. The PPE, there's a level A, B, C, D that we're going to cover. D's your everyday work clothes that can include some respiratory protection, but it's only light air purifying, and it can have the steel-toed shoes or reinforced toed shoes, as well as a shank. Metal at the base, so that if you were to step on any shops like a nail, it would not give you a puncture wound. And so again, level D is your everyday, depending on what the job site is. Level C, then you bump up to an air purifying respirator. Level B bumps you up a higher level, is to the SCBA, the self-contained breathing apparatus. And level A is what you typically see with the CDC if they have a high level contaminant, and you will see it with some substances that are also very toxic. And that would be that SCBA, as well as that encapsulated suit for no skin contact. So those are those levels. Here's some pictures of them. Sorry, they're a little distorted there. And this is what we're covering tonight, is our identification of the hot zone, warm zone, and cold zone. And there is our spill. So that's the big thing. And we're going to practice a mock spill. And so we're going to go with some incidents and bring it through the response, and each person take a different role. And hopefully everybody here is going to receive not only hopefully an A for your grade for the 3-credit HAZWOPA class, but also the 8.5 by 11 certificate, which I will print and sign and send to you in the mail, unless you tell me you wanted to pick it up or something, with a hopefully laminated wallet card. And so everybody should email me or submit it with your test how you want your name to be printed on the certificate. And that's it for that. So any questions?
I'm good.
Okay, great. So now, did anybody have a specific role that they had already? Oh, before you go there, let me just open the exam, if that's okay. And so it's a Word document. So it should have put it right there. And when you open this, I have assigned on Moodle each student a different CAS number. So you're going to use that CAS number to find the SDS and attach the URL for that SDS. And in your safety data sheet for your particular material. Everybody's going to have their own material. It's already listed on Moodle. You're going to find that NFPA rating and put it down here. And then what does it mean to you as the worker? And then find the PPE section and write down what it means to you there. And then if you did have an exposure, how would you respond to that material if there was an exposure to you or somebody else? And then you're going to write out and sketch a scenario for that same material. And this is what we're specifically doing this evening. And you're going to redo it with your material and put it into steps. And drawing ability doesn't have to be great. You can use symbols and label those symbols. And then we
Stick
have,
figures.
did you have a question, Jason?
No, I said stick figures.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No problem with those. Those are appreciated. That's what you'd get from me. That's right. And give them a little smile or a scream, help. And on these, you can cut and paste. This is demonstrating that you know where to find the information. And this exam is designed to be completed within 2 hours. So I'm hoping it doesn't take people much longer than 2 hours and sometimes shorter. And so you can cut and paste these abbreviations, but then give me an example of how it might protect the worker. And it can be very short statement. It doesn't even have to be a full sentence, okay? So we've got some of those acronyms, then we've got a few terms here, as well as like we see with those level A, B, C, D. And again, even for here, you are welcome to cut and paste from the PowerPoint we just quickly saw, okay? So if you want to just cut and paste from there, that's fine. Because again, a lot of what we're doing in this class is increasing our awareness and knowing where to get information and then how to apply that information for our safety and the safety of the other workers. If you have any questions, problems on any of those, just give me an email. And again, a lot of the things that are in here are on that PowerPoint that I just went over. Quickly, does anybody want to give a physical hazard that they can think of?
Sharp steel.
Okay, great, great. I went right away to like an earthquake and something falling on somebody's head like concrete, but any of those are excellent one. Can somebody else give me a chemical hazard? I know Courtney, you're here and Mary's here.
Oh, sorry, I'm here. I forgot I was already unmuted. A chemical hazard could be kind of like in that OSHA confined space about the paint thinning.
Okay, methylene
fire.
chloride. Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that methylene chloride. That's a good one. Yep, bleach, all of those chemical hazards. And Mary, can you give us a biological one?
Can't think of any right now off the top of my head.
So we are actually like living the biggest one in 100 years.
The virus?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right.
So COVID, yep. So that's a great example. Okay, and then I think we have 20 of these multiple choice questions, and that's it. And so you can just go through those if that's okay, and you can, different people, some people will type in the letter, some people would rather highlight it, yellow or something. Some people print it and they'd rather write or circle and then scan it in. Any of those are fine. Any question for the test?
I don't.
Okay, to get the OSHA certificate, the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and the laminated card, you only need a passing grade, but you do need to do some type of a engagement. And so Jason, you were already met that with me last week, but I'm so glad you're here because you're actually hoping to work in this field. And so the more practice and comfort you get, I think the better you're going to be protected and be an asset to the team. Take it.
I have a question.
Yep.
So the CAS number the SDS to the CAS number. I saw where you put our CAS numbers on the Moodle. Where do we enter in those CAS numbers again?
Oh,
I-
just Google it. So yours is right here, Courtney?
Yeah, the 500.
Yep. So if you just go ahead up here, if you paste and go, it should bring you right to it. If not, you can put in that CAS and
Okay.
then the number, and it should get you right there. But you're formaldehyde,
Okay.
okay?
Thanks.
So good question. Anybody else on a question?
No.
Okay,
No.
great. And so also, if you do think about taking a job in this area and you wanted to come on campus and practice with a respirator or any other type of equipment, or especially air monitoring equipment, give me the heads up and I will try to make arrangements to either meet you or have it available for you to practice with. Before you start working on a site with any particular equipment that's safety, you should get a short training at least and be able to access the instruction manual and any of the guidelines that go along with that particular piece of equipment. Okay, so scenarios. So did anybody think of a role that they wanted for today?
I'm up for whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
same.
Okay, so usually would go up into the lab and would have like a lab worker, a student. And so they would be this. So I will, Courtney, you know our lab pretty well, Courtney.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a nitric acid spill, unfortunately. Nitric acid spill. And this is just going to be 1 gallon. And so you are going to be the worker in this case, and you're sort of going to have a dual role because there's nobody around, even though there should have been somebody around and you should never have worked in the lab yourself. But you know, your instructor, she went, I don't know, downstairs to grab something downstairs. Okay.
Okay.
So you're probably going to have to call yourself in the 911 and everything, Courtney. Okay.
Okay.
You're it. And then Mary,
Mhm.
you are going to be this first responder here.
Okay.
And usually we need to have 2. And if anybody sees that we got somebody else joining us, let me know, because I thought we were going to have one other person, but that's okay. And then Jason, you're going to have to dual it role here, okay? You're going to be
Okay.
Jason. You know what, though? I'm actually going to dual you, Jason, and Mary. Mary, you're going to be a fireman too, okay?
All right.
Okay, so there's like Mary, the hazardous responder number 1, and Mary, the fireman, and we have Jason, the EMT, and we have Jason, the HAZWAPA responder 2. So out of this whole group, Mary and Jason are the only ones with their OSHA 40-hour training, their certificates, and nobody else actually has that.
we're done for.
Now don't tell me that. Okay, so now if we go to this diagram over here, and you can make yourself a very simple one, is let me see, why can't I enlarge this here? Let me just, I'm going to take us out of here. And in the meantime, I'm hoping your skin's not burning. Actually, somebody can look up the SDS for nitric acid. And let's see, who do you think should be the responsible one to find the SDS?
Probably me.
Well, so Courtney should have seen it ahead of time, but she's been working in the lab all semester. And, you know, it's probably in the 3-ring binder in the back and so forth, right, Courtney?
Yeah.
However, though, the one thing that I usually like in the lab is looking quickly at that diamond. So you probably have that image, you know, the NFPA image in front of you.
Oh, I have. Oh, in the lab?
In the lab.
I have
Yes,
it. I have
on the lab bench. So right on the lab bench, you
I
probably
have the safety data sheet up, but it doesn't have a FPA rating.
NFPA. You know what? You
NFPA.
have to go down to like section 10, 9 or 10 usually, and it should have it. Jason and Mary can also look for the SDS for nitric acid.
I went to the CDC NIOSH page and did the quick guide look, and I just went with went to nitric acid.
Oh, you're such a brown noser has whopper responder, Jason. That is great. That is great. Well, you certainly fit into the role there. That is great. Because that's what the EMT and fire man or firewoman would have done too, is they would have gone to the NIOSH guide. So can you share with us, well, first, let's get to that point. So we do have, Courtney has an SDS that's not very helpful to her at the moment. So Mary, do you have any suggestions?
For like containing the spill.
For finding the NFPA for the nitric acid.
I just Googled the SDS for it. Let's see. Having some trouble finding it, but
Okay, so I think this is it here. And then it depends on its concentration. So I'm going to go with this one right here. So I'm going to bring this over, hopefully. And this is what you have in front of you, Courtney. Copy the image. Go over to this.
Okay. In truthfulness, it's not what I have in front of me.
Well, it is now because you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're visualizing, and Courtney's in the lab working on the lab bench. She's got a gallon of this nitric acid. The bottle next to her has this label, and you had been transferring some of the nitric acid to make a dilution so that we could do some preservation for metals for that instrumentation class you're in also. And so when you did the transfer, unfortunately, there was a hairline crack in the bottom and the bottom let go. And so
Okay.
now, even though you have a lab jacket on, this nitric acid, and you have your latex gloves on also, the nitric acid has spilled onto your lab coat and down, it's sloshed down to the bottom of your pant leg, and so it's beginning to burn.
Okay.
So now you happen to be in here all by yourself. So what do you think you should do?
Probably call 911, but shouldn't I take off the clothes that have been contaminated first?
Okay, so you're going to take off
My lab coat
lab
and
coat.
gloves.
Gloves. Okay, and you're going to have to take the pants and the shoes. You're going to just
All right,
kick off the shoes.
Pants and shoes. All right. And yeah.
You're not standing in it, are you?
Well, that's what I was going to say. And I would need to get away from the puddle.
Okay, so we're going to put that first, right? Remove. self. And to tell you the truth, you're probably going to remove yourself and do that clothing before the 911.
Right.
I would let a big scream help too, right?
Holy crap.
Are you
Yeah.
willing to give it? So what's your scream going to be?
I'm burning. Somebody help me.
Is that the Wicked Witch of the West? I'm melting.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, and a part of this scenario is for us to actually become more comfortable at, you know, either screaming for help or even just dialing 911. Is, you know, a lot of times people haven't used a wall phone or a desk phone. They've only grown up using the cell phones. A thing about the cell phones is in the Four Cs buildings, it takes almost 25 minutes for EMS, the regular EMS, to get there. And then it's going to take probably 2.5 hours for the HAZWAPA responders. So the HAZWAPA responders are not really going to be there. They're not even going to, Courtney's going to be gone when they get there. So Courtney's going to depend upon Jason, the EMT, and Mary, the firewoman, in order to hopefully transport her to get special treatment for her burns, because she's got her shin and maybe even the feet have some burns from the nitric acid. And so, okay, so removed self, take off the lab coat, gloves, kick off shoes, take off pants, maybe the 911, but even maybe you got to kind of judge there. So this is sort of a judgment over 911, then shower, or shower and let somebody else do the 911. Now you are assuming that somebody, i.e. the MIA professor, shows up, but she starts talking somewhere. Someone else, shower and let someone else.
Darn your social butterfly professor.
Oh, I know. Down at the copy machine or the water bubbler. Okay, isn't that the way? So on this though, I don't know. So Mary, have you used a dial phone, like a hardwire phone, before?
Yes.
Okay, and you know that that's not like such an unusual question, because I bet you my son that's 15 has never used a wall or a desk phone. The point I'm getting is that with the cell phones, some of them you have to push the forward button, you know, to make the call.
Yeah.
And the wall phones, you don't. Okay, so let's get back to the phone business. When whoever dials that 911 at Four Cs, hopefully that particular phone actually gives the identification of the room that the person is in, so that the EMT and the firewoman can get to the right spot. Because can you imagine if you just got a phone call from one of the labs saying, you know, there's a nitric acid spill, I need help and in an ambulance right away, that they go, and this happened to us 2 summers ago, they go through like all 3 floors, lecture halls, and couldn't find the person that needed it. So you really want to be careful about knowing how to give specific directions on where you need them, and also to stay on the line too while they're trying to get there in case they don't get to the right location. Most buildings now have labels on them, so they have a side A, B, C, D, and a number at that egress, so that responders can quickly find them. So here we are. Okay, so you're in the shower, Courtney, and guess what? That shower is only cold water. And it happens that the spill was in January. So you are now not only burned, but you are suffering from being too cold. So luckily though, guess who showed up?
The teacher.
No, she's still talking. But you actually had to call the 911, and
Oh.
Mary is there with Jason. Okay.
Mary and Jason. Oh,
Yep.
good.
So usually you're going to stay under that shower. So it's a cold only emergency shower for like 15 minutes. And that can seem like so long.
Forever.
Be- um, especially because you should also, wash your face, your hands, maybe the arms, etc. And okay, so
Is there
now,
soap in the shower or is it just
oh,
water?
this is wide open, and you got no pants either, even Courtney. So I've been at a lab where somebody had to go totally without clothes for this reason in that cold shower. And then, but luckily those first responders, thank you, Jason, because he brought a blanket, and we do have the fire blanket, and you can use the fire blanket also. So now you're out of the shower, you're wrapped in the blanket, and they've actually put you onto the stretcher. And Jason, you're leaving with her.
I am taking Courtney to the ER so she can get bandaged and bundled.
Yep. They're probably going to continue to maybe neutralize or make sure that there's no residuals, and put a salve on. Or they might even have to give you some IV with antibiotics because they don't want you to have an infection, right?
Oh, okay.
So you're going to be there actually overnight, Courtney.
Oh, that's too bad. They
Yeah.
don't have that great of food there. You lose weight when you eat in the hospital.
Well, I think there's something that I like at their cafeteria, and I'm trying to think if it's like they have a ginger snap cookie or something there that I'm kind of fond of. So I'll come visit you is the point.
Oh,
But in the meantime,
Stop talking.
we've got this mess in the lab because now I did come upstairs because they also triggered the fire alarm. So not only the 911 to call there, but somebody thought of triggering the
Oh,
fire
wow.
alarm. So that was
Smack
pretty
that
good.
person in the head.
Alarm. Okay. So you're taken away. Okay. Courtney to and we went over some of the things. Okay. So Jason, the EMT, you're gone. You're done for this shift. But Jason, the HAZWAPA responder, is coming into this mess. So we've got the fire alarm. We've got the campus now evacuated. We've got Courtney at the hospital. We've got the firewoman, Mary, there. And we've got Mary, one of the first responders, also there. And I'm just got this really bad migraine here, I'm sorry to say. And so I'm going to let Mary, and Jason take over.
All right.
So as a fire person, as a firewoman, I would probably approach you and ask about how you're feeling with the migraine and see what's happening there, and then approach the first Mary responder, and be telling her about your symptoms. And let's see. And then as the first responder, Mary, I'd be containing the spill so it doesn't leak anymore, but not doing anything further than that. That's probably what Jason, the second hazardous technician, would do.
Okay, great. So you're actually, Mary, I promoted you to be the fire chief also. So you're going to direct, you're going to be taking care of everything, and you're doing a great job. And now you've got your 2 HAZWOPA responders here. And at this point, you've got your NIOSH information. And like you said, you've done the best you can to contain it. But, that was on the 2nd floor of the science building, and there was no drain underneath the shower. So we've got the gallon of the nitric acid eating through the floor, and we've got that shower water that's got some of that nitric acid diluting it, and now it's washing down to the 1st floor, and it hasn't hit the ground floor. Luckily, Mary, fire chief, has gotten everybody basically off the campus for this, because now we're a good 45 minutes and we're going on to an hour. Luckily too, those HAZWOPA responders were not too far away, and their truck was already ready to go. So they just quickly got here within an hour and 10 minutes. So that is great. So yeah, Mary, you showed them it, you gave them the information, and now they can take over. So Mary, the responder, and Jason, you tell us what you're going to do.
I would try to contain the spill. I know that if you want to dilute an acid, you add water to it, but you can also add a base. So I would hope that our HAZWOPA truck has some baking soda on it, so we can start neutralizing some of this acid. Looking at the sticker for what you brought up for the nitric acid, it looks like it's also an oxidizer. So is that correct? Can I see that placard you had?
Yes, just give me 1 second. I was rearranging a scenario here. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, right there.
So that is an oxidizer. So I want to try to start getting things out of there that could potentially burn. If it gets hit with this acid, like any wood or something of that nature, I'd probably want to keep it wet so it doesn't burn. And then I would say do our best to contain the spill, soak up the spill, and neutralize the acid so it's not going to harm anything or do any more damage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so you're working with Mary. So Mary, what are you thinking?
Yeah, he said that it's an oxidizer, so water would help neutralize it. So definitely add water to it to stabilize it. And then once it's stable, we can collect it. And then after that, let's see. And then the collection, would that be in a glass or a plastic container? Would that matter?
Okay, great points there. So let us just go back. I was just trying to get the safety data sheet. So this happens to be, you can see it, right? Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's one of our suppliers. And so, right, so you see here in regards to the fire person plus the HAZWOPA responders don't want us to have it start a fire, etc. And these are wood cabinets. And luckily the building itself is mostly concrete. So that's a good thing. So right here in section 5 is the NFPA. So Courtney, you can check on your SDS for the NFPA, and you can
That's
see
the one I had. I just didn't know it was an
NFPA.
FPA.
Yes. Yep.
Like,
So they
in
don't give us right.
here. Yeah.
Some so when we look at these SDSs, they are required to have like section 1 identification, section 2 hazard identification, section 3, etc., that, and so forth and so on. So the numbers and the sequence, but some of the companies use this as more of like a marketing tool also. So the company that is selling it is right up here, and their layout. And so some have more graphics than others, but so on this one right here, they don't give us the nice diamond that I like with the colors. They only give us the text. But again, I like this a lot because you go across it and you're like, great, here's my health right away. 4, oh my word, that puts up like, Courtney, are you still alive? You know, when we see that 4 with the material that you've been exposed to and it spilled on you.
Oh,
So,
wow.
You know,
and
one thing,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just saying, one thing I did notice is that it reacts with water to produce heat. So
So it is exothermic. And so
yeah,
this is the issue, is in the lab, and this isn't really that funny, and it's not something that was very nice, but one of the lab things that happened when I was working at a commercial lab is, as a new chemist that had a bachelor's degree came on the job, nobody would give them, or usually they would not, it depends on who you worked with, but some people would not give them the heads up when they made dilutions of acids. So especially with sulfuric acid, if you went to make a 1:1 18 normal normality dilution and you made it directly into a plastic container, it was so hot it would melt the plastic container, and then of course it would be just released out from your container. So you would have one of these spills, and it was sort of to show the person that they were pretty dumb, I guess. And so typically you'd have to make it in glass, and that was a good note, Mary, you had over when you did the cleanup. Would you be putting it into a plastic container, your waste? And the same with Jason over, we need to be heads up as we mix it with water. So ideally, if it was the acid and it was concentrated, there's nothing we can do immediately while Courtney's in the shower and the HAZWAPA team is not there yet to, other than we could separate it, and we have some, a lab spill kit. But the best thing is, right, to not have the water mixed with it, but on the acid add, say, baking soda. So that was a great thing to neutralize it. Plus the baking soda is dry, so it's not going to increase that exothermic reaction. So it's not going to melt down something or burn it there. So those are all good things. So luckily, the HAZWAPA responders did bring the spill kit for acids. And so there are specific kits for acids and specific kits for solvents and specific kits for mercury and other substances. And luckily your fire chief, Mary, had given you the heads up that this was specifically nitric acid. So when you came in, you brought the container with all the supplies for neutralizing. So it had the baking soda. And then it also had what you could call as pigs or tubes that had absorbent material. So you were able to use those to wrap around the spill. And so that in this case would be your hot zone. And so anybody working in that area would want to follow, you know, the personal protective equipment that we're looking at this SDS right here. Luckily, though, we don't have to worry too much about the fumes. You do have to worry a little bit about them. And so that's where you see these levels right here over what you'd be looking at. So the HAZWAPA team brought in some air monitoring equipment. So they have some chemical color reaction tubes, and they're drawing some air samples through those tubes that have pre-measured, pre-mixed chemicals that would react and tell you the concentration of the nitric acid in the air. And so you'd know if you were safe to not wear breathing apparatus. But I think in this case, both of those HAZWAPA responders, Mary and Jason, would be wearing air purifying respirators that had cartridges specifically for nitric acid.
Do they actually have like baking soda in them? So something to counteract the fumes or of that nature?
So that's a great question. I would have to bring up on a supply house and look at the material that's in the cartridge. One of the things that we've done in the past is we've split open cartridges and then had them sealed so that people could see the actual layers, and then would also look at the manufacturer's specs that went along with those particular cartridges.
Mhm.
But I don't know for the cartridges, nitric acid cartridges, if it's baking soda. I'm thinking in my head over that one. The typical one I do know is the ones for the volatile organics, and quite frequently that's granulated activated carbon. So similar to a
Okay.
fish tank. So we would have to look that one up. So if you don't find it quickly, Jason, just shoot me an email and I will try to find it. Okay, so here we are with some of the other principles, etc. But this exposure controls is what our two HAZWAPA responders are really concerned about for their own safety, because at this point, thank you, Fire Chief Mary, with your staff, you've gotten everybody out of the building, you've gotten everybody off of the circular campus. And can you think of a few reasons why the fire chief took such a drastic move for an isolated incidents?
Because like you said earlier, that was going down through the second floor into the first floor, so it was traveling rather fast, and the airborne fumes could have gotten into either of those floors. So just to get everybody off the premises would have been safer than to keep them inside one of the floors.
Right, because with this, we don't know how much of the infrastructure could have been damaged. So any of the electrical system causing an electrical fire, or even if it was to get through some of the pipes of the natural gas, and now all of a sudden we have a gas leak on top of the nitric acid with the water from the shower. And even just the water from the shower might get into the electrical system, or you might start having some physical problems with that water dripping onto people. And of course, you talked about the fumes, and you don't know too if somebody else like our HAZWAPA responders or the fire department that's helping out on this and overseeing it, if you have another person who's hurt, you want to be able to quickly get the emergency responders in there, the ambulance, and get them off the campus safely. So I know way back at 9/11, for that campus to be evacuated took something like 4+ hours. Luckily, I was not on it at that time, but people sat in their cars 4+ hours waiting to be able to get out of the parking lot.
Wow.
So we don't typically think about how long it takes to move people, because they're usually, staggered on the campus and so forth like that. But we've had that problem if we've had a tropical rainstorm and they've shut down, or even some of the snowstorms, and all of a sudden they say, oh, the school is closed. So you have a lot of those. So Four Cs does have different plans that we do try to follow. And of course, we have our own security. And so they would have been helping the fire chief. It should be my understanding the fire chief is in that incident command system. The fire chief is the one who's going to that's the person that's top dog. And everybody ought to be listening to the fire chief for these scenario situations.
Mhm.
Oh my word. So I'm already exhausted. So I hope they brought the Gatorade and everything else, because of course you could have gotten dehydrated, the stress. And even though it's January, the building is heated and it's very hot in there, and you came in with, so you wore your Tyvek suit. So does anybody know what level Mary and Jason are wearing? A, B, C, or D?
I would say
Um,
let's see.
yeah, that's where I was gonna go.
That
It
is
could
great.
be.
Now, when your fire man person, fire woman, Mary came in, she was probably in B. So a lot of times, the fire fighters have the supplied air packs on them, the SCBAs. So they're not totally encapsulated, so they're not A, but they are usually B. So she came into that at B, and the HAZWAPA people decided that maybe they didn't need the SCBAs, because you see these numbers here for the exposure, and they had the nitric acid neutralizing cartridge, and they did the air testing. So they decided they could come in with C. So that was a good call. And with the C, they wore the Tyvek suits. And the Tyvek suits just gave them splash protection, but that's all that they needed. And so now I think they've neutralized it, and they've taken pH paper, and they've been able to verify that the acid has been neutralized. The shower water is neutral also. And so now they can start the cleanup. And they're probably going to put it into not 55-gallon drums, but maybe something that's more about a 20-gallon size. And it's probably going to be plastic for the nitric acid. And then they're going to have to do the labeling. So that's
Yeah,
where the DOT type certificate came in, and they're going to have to produce a manifest for it.
can I
And
ask a question?
yep,
If we've gone through the effort of taking our acid spill kit and using, I don't know, let's say 3 pounds of baking soda on all this nitric acid, and that's just going to dilute it down, what do we really have to DOT placard? I mean, if the acid is all neutralized at that point in time, couldn't we just take it to the Barnstable dump and say, here's a spill kit that we used baking soda on an acid, and send it off site to be incinerated?
so that is a great observation, because now I was in a typical in this scenario basically up at Clean Harbors. And so we had done the response cleanup ourselves, but the fire chief oversaw it. And typically, if you can demonstrate that it is no longer going to fall within the RECRA, where you'd have to get specific disposal and generate the manifest, then yes, is that you could wash it. You could and I would verify that before you go right away and put it down the drain or something. But this is a solid, and it's not acidic anymore. Then taking it off in the regular trash could be an option. However, though, if something had happened, like maybe there was a clump that
Mhm.
we didn't test, and that was exothermic, and it caused the cardboard in the trash dumpster to heat up and then ignite. And we had a fire where the nitric acid got onto cardboard, and that cardboard ignited and turned into be $1 million cleanup from just a little bit of the nitric acid igniting the cardboard. But anyhow, so it would depend, Jason. And
Okay.
so if you're a conservative company and your fire chief wants to make sure it is not going to be a landfill liability or anything else, then they would end up manifesting it. And even if they'll put it in, and it'll be a very cheap disposal, and you'll probably call somebody like Clean Harbors or Triumph, what is it? Triumphant, something like that.
Mhm.
So several of our former students work for these companies, and that we actually have them come into 4Cs to take care of the lab waste. And they set up a computer system where they can manifest everything, and then they can put on the appropriate, make sure it has the appropriate DOT approved transport containers with the labels, and that's for, you know, our formaldehyde and if we had any other lab waste. So on that, yes, so at Clean Harbors, they ended up manifesting and then sending it for disposal in a double-lined landfill, et cetera, like that, just to be on the extra conservative side of things.
Okay.
But you are right for, in theory, that could have been just if it was all neutral and there was no toxicity, et cetera, to it, could have been a just throw it out in the regular trash. Yep.
Okay.
So anybody think of anything else? But don't do it in the regular trash based on me, is you go with your fire chief, okay? Is that definitely go with the fire chief.
Authority having jurisdiction and all that.
Yes, yes, yeah. Okay, so nobody had anything else? Courtney, how are you feeling over there at the ER? They didn't have to med lift you anywhere, right?
No, I got my IV with my antibiotics, and I got wrapped up. My burns are wrapped up and covered now with the bandages, and I'm feeling better.
Okay,
I
good.
got some clothes. I'm doing better.
Okay, so one of the things we really try to do too is practice putting on the PPE, is that donning it and then doffing it. But of course, we're just this remote, our online, and so we're not doing that. But if you did want to practice, give me the heads up at 4Cs, and I can even put out a kit with the Tyvek and some other things. Or they're using the labs, so we can use the labs and keep socially distanced. Okay, so I think those are the things. One of the things about the confined space entry is you're usually concerned about making sure you have enough oxygen. And so typically you would be monitoring for the percent oxygen throughout any entry in a confined space. And you'd have things set up in a whole safety plan procedure. And that cradle to grave, what it is now that you've got that baking soda with the nitric acid, is that if something was to happen, like you send it to a landfill like the Barnstable transfer station, is that if there is ever like a cleanup and they trace that back to the quote generator of a hazardous waste, then you are responsible for your portion of the cleanup. So the thing that most people think of is with car oil, is when they dispose of that, they usually have a fee. And if it's relatively clean oil, they might even find a second life for it and burn it. And then it's usually not going to be an issue and haunt somebody. But if it was to go to a landfill where it was seeping into the ground and contaminated the groundwater, and then there's a $1 billion cleanup, they might go after everybody that sent their waste oil, like the garages, to pay part of that cleanup. And so that's where that cradle to grave is, when you start that manifest, is tracing that material, and mostly again for the litigation for
Could I
the
ask a quick
finance.
question?
Yep.
You said there's usually air monitoring for the percent oxygen in a confined space. Is the laboratory considered a confined space?
No, and confined space can be really subjective. You wouldn't think so. So, OSHA definition is an area that was not designed for routine workers, something like that. And so you could be sitting like downstairs in the science, the basement there. We have some rooms that only have one doorway in and out. And so way back when they used to say, well, if you only had one door in and out and not any other windows or any other way to get out, it would be considered a confined space. But if the room, even if it just has that one doorway, is designed for a regular workspace, like somebody's desk, etc., it is not considered confined space. So typically, and Jason, did you actually get the tour of the Barnstable Water Treatment Facility?
Yes, we went today.
Okay, great. And I saw your paragraph, but I wasn't sure if they had to do it remotely, but you were able to go in person, right?
Yep, Andrew and I went around the facility and looked at things and poked around, and I actually took some pictures of the stuff that I wanted to write about. So
Yep. And did you tell him you were currently taking our OSHA class?
I did. I
Okay,
did.
great, because he's come in for the 8-hour refresher and he is the most enjoyable, pleasant person.
He's a hoot.
Yes, yes. You know, they have a good time down there. I don't know if you noticed that. It's just, and they have gardens down there in the summer. Yep. Could you say anything on their confined space that you saw?
I didn't go in it. It was right in front of the septage building, and he was like, "Hey, look, confined space." And I go, "Oh, hey, that's awesome." But one of the things we did do is we went to one of the pump rooms, and I would almost consider that a confined space, but I think it had enough ventilation to really not be one. It was basically a doorway that walked down, gosh, I'm going to say 3 flights of stairs underground into
Yeah.
a giant room that had 5 or 6 pumps to move the water back and forth. And I would almost consider that a confined space, because you have to go up 3 or 4 flights of stairs in order to get back outside.
Yes, and I've been in a lot of the pump rooms at the different facilities. So you are right. At some of the facilities, those pump rooms are labeled confined spaces, and that they do have to, every time they go in and out, they have to follow their protocol.
Mhm.
And depending on the size and the design, it could be different protocols. And so to answer Courtney's question on the oxygen there is, so in some cases, they would be wearing an oxygen monitor, and they would be having somebody already in a harness and ready to go in to rescue them if there was any air quality problem that caused them to collapse. And so with that one at the Barnstable one, I think that it's not just the ventilation, but so say if somebody did collapse in there, it's wide enough to be able to, you could say, easily get them out. Where that in other areas, it's so tight, you would have needed a tripod and a harness to get a person out of that area.
All right.
So typically now the manholes, those are considered confined spaces, but again, not all of them. But and even when they put their electrical system down in some of these areas, but they've been doing better engineering designs so that there's less areas that need to be considered confined spaces. But you're right, it's usually those pump rooms, even though some of them are enormous, because of them being being like a concrete chamber and only having the one entrance, which is also the exit. But it was a big enough one, like I said, that they could easily get emergency responders with the equipment in and out of there. So I think that's part of it. Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay. Anything else anybody came up with?
Gosh. Not off the top of my head.
Okay. So you guys, excellent job. If you think of anything, you know where I am. If you have any problems and questions with anything, you know how to reach me. And I will stop the recording of this.